on, baby. We're in the back. At least they'll all fall off the cliff. We'll know. Of course, somebody could get us from behind.
Very disruptive to their what they're focusing on, wasting energy. So I want to play it. I justify it because I'm using this as education. Right? I'm not standing here by myself with my camera just trying to get the shot. So here, just for Metal Art, and I'll walk through and play it for you guys in the back too. Has anyone heard that yet today?
Yeah.
So this bird is actually in the blackbird family as well. Definitely a better view. So I am happy to welcome Dana. Dana Ford is a good friend of mine. We have been doing programming together for the last 3-4 years. And Dana is the president of Braddock Bay Raptor Research. Braddock Bay is up on the western side of Rochester on Lake Ontario. Is it Hilton? Is the township or Grace? Grace is Bannerton Road out there. Owl Woods, if you've ever been out there. So Braddock Bay, I won't tell all of it, Dana will tell more, but Braddock Bay is a research institution, educational institution, kind of similar to Audubon, just a smaller scale. And Dana also has, obviously, ambassador birds that she works with that she's brought today to kind of give you some up-close looks at different birds of prey species. So I'm really happy to have her here, and this is a very busy time of year for us in this field and with different programs and events, and then just, all the birds that are around, like we want to be out birding too, but we're really love doing these events. Thank you so much for coming out, and feel free to take pictures while she's presenting, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, yeah, and ask questions too. Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks for having me here again.
It's always a pleasure to work with Alyssa and these programs that Montezuma Audubon puts together. It's just great ways to get out and experience birding, the birds that are in our own backyards. As she mentioned, it is a busy time of year. Our season is starting to wind down a little bit, and we're starting to be able to relax a little and get into enjoying the summertime soon. But for those of you who are not familiar with Braddock Bay and Braddock Bay Raptor Research, it's a wonderful place to go any time of year, but particularly in the spring because it has a huge raptor migration. We're one of the best sites in the springtime in North America to see migrating hawks, eagles, falcons, vultures. We have a record season of turkey vultures going right now, so it's pretty impressive. Yeah, so we see, because we're situated on the southern shore of Lake Ontario, and these raptors are moving northward in the spring like a lot of other bird species are, heading to their breeding grounds. They hit Lake Ontario and they understand it's a barrier to them. So they're following the lake shore up and around and further north. They're not crossing the Great Lakes in many areas. Because the air over the body of water is too cold, they need lift from thermals or updrafts to save energy in the long journeys. So most seasons we see about an average of 50,000 raptors. And that includes up to 17 different species. So I think that's one of the most, I can hear some blues and ahs going in the eyes already. I think that's one of the most surprising things that people that live locally in the Finger Lakes area, Western New York area, that just have never really looked up at this time of year in certain places where these birds get concentrated. So hopefully what you'll see today and when you hear from me and learn from me will spark a little interest to go seeking out some of those hot spots for raptors, not just the warblers, although I do get an itch to get out and see all the colorful songbirds right now. It's peak day, peak time of year for that, so it's always exciting. So I'm going to introduce you to the world of raptors, or birds of prey. That includes, of course, hawks, falcons, eagles, owls, even vultures, mentioned too. So many different species there. So just a smattering. I've got 4 of our ambassador birds, our education birds here to share with you. So just a smattering, and it's just a sample of that world. And all of these are species that you can see around here at different times of the year, some not always year-round. They are birds that were all found in New York State, all have permanent injuries, so they're not able to be released back to the wild. They've encountered some unfortunate situation that left them handicapped, but now they have a new role in life. They are teaching birds, so it helps people of all ages learn about these amazing birds of prey. So, without any further ado, you're not here to see everything. You want to see the birds. So I have all the birds are trained to sit on the club. They're usually pretty comfortable. Everyone has different days though, so some might be a little more antsy than others. You might hear some vocalizations, as I think you already have from the first bird I'm going to introduce you to. So some of them are a little noisy this time of year because it is spring and the hormones are raging. But no worries there. So yeah, that's also another neat thing you'll get to experience. So I'll come out and present, and I might walk around a little bit, especially with the smaller birds, so a better view. So let's start with this.
Wow.
So when we talk about raptors to begin with, we mentioned, eagles and hawks. A lot of people have images in their brain already set to that you're going to be seeing these really large, impressive, powerful birds. And yes, that includes some of them. Sorry. But they come in all different sizes. And so for some people, they might be surprised when they see our first bird like this, that it's kind of on the smaller side of things. This is our broad-winged hawk. Fuzzy right there. Just doing some preening. there. Broad-winged hawks are relative to the red-tailed hawks you might be used to seeing around here year-round. They're in the Buteo genus, which Buteos are the soaring hawks, soaring group of hawks. They're built more with longer, wider wings, hence the name broad-winged hawk, and shorter tails, and they really are built more for open space. Pause for a second. It's starting to rain. Emily, can you go put the windows? Do I have to do it here? Yeah, I should. Okay, figure it out. That's my dog.
Wow.
Glad that you guys missed the rain. Now we're hearing this here. So broad-winged hawks are a species you're going to see here only in the spring and the summertime. They are fully migratory. They spend their winters in Central and South America, but they are the most common migrants in eastern U.S. And up into Canada for the spring and the summer breeding season. So they travel great distances, twice a year, fall and
I know he is.
It's really wonderful. Excited. So her issue and why she's with us is, many of you probably already know this, she's missing her left eye. She also has a little damage to her right
It's like
leg,
Rosie.
so she's unable to fly 100%. But she's been taken to captivity very well. She's usually very comfortable around people. She's adjusted her life to this kind of lifestyle there. But a great example of what a raptor is built to be. You can get a chance to see them a little closer than normally in the wild. They have talons, sharp, powerful feet, sharp claws. That's how they catch their food. They're carnivores, so they're hunting birds, and they are used to catching. Broadwings have a lot of small mammals on their menu, but also some frogs and snakes too. So they're a little bit of a herb here. So often they'll nest here, a pond or a stream, a little deeper in the forest than a red-tailed hawk would, and that helps to vary their menu and give them more possibilities of foods to catch to feed their brood there. So they have those strong talons for catching their food, that hooked beak for tearing meat, characteristics of all raptors, and of course the vision. Strong, powerful vision for seeing things at a great distance and also with much more clarity. So when they're circling up in the sky or they're sitting on a telephone pole in a tall tree, they can see all the details going on down on the ground. They're very tuned into movement. So that's going to be how they're going to find their prey. That's their strongest sense. And you can notice as she's sitting here, she's looking around, always checking things out and thinking, if I was where would I sit if I was able to do somewhere else? Yeah.
How did you come about the bird?
So this bird was found injured up north of Syracuse and went to a wildlife rehabilitator up there. She healed up her injuries, and then they needed a permanent home for her, and so looked for placement with an educator, which happened to be me. So we have education permits at Braddock Raptor Research, so we can take the birds in after they've gone through all their rehab and have determined non-releasable.
You know how she was damaged? Was it a car hit?
Yes, she was hit by a car, which is a common thing that happens with a lot of our hawks and other raptors, owls as well. They tend to hunt along our roadsides and great grassy areas for small mammals, small animals there. And when they focus in on their prey on the other side of the road, that's what they're focused on, and it's hard to maneuver out of the way of a moving vehicle. So unfortunately, that's a common encounter.
So like the person that hit the bird called you?
Well, actually, we don't know if it was the person who hit the bird. Well, whoever found this bird injured didn't call us first. They called a wildlife rehabilitator, and that's where they end up going first. And then they can get veterinary care if they need. and then back to the wildlife rehabilitator to heal and get stronger. If they can release them, they will. And then if they can't, in the case of all these birds, they look for other facilities or educators that will use them in programming like this. So we get an after effect. So it's actually more, I was seeking birds, and this bird happened to be available. I'm very grateful for. So happy to take this bird in. And now they'll live with us for the rest of their life. Yes.
Do you have volunteers to do rehabilitations?
We don't have any rehabilitation volunteers because
Okay.
we don't do rehab, but we do have volunteers that do a lot of different things. Not just my daughter, but so we have volunteers who help care for the birds. I have a small crew of volunteers for that. We have volunteers who do our owl roost surveys in the springtime. Volunteers who band, volunteers who plan our events and do other education work for us too. The Hawk Watch is another project where we often use volunteers too. So everyone who does all the work that we do is pretty much volunteer. The only person that we hire is our hawk counter. In the springtime, as I mentioned earlier, we're a big raptor migration site. So one way, it gives us an opportunity to study these birds, on a regular basis. We know they're going to show up in the spring. It gives us a chance to count them. And long-term population monitoring is what's really important for studying these birds and knowing how they're doing. And hawk watches or hawk counts, raptor migration counts, are a perfect way to do that. So we actually have someone out in the spring, March 1st through May 31st, so we're in the last couple of weeks, counting what goes over in the sky. And some days, this is what the sky can look like. Alright? So
Wow.
from those of you in the back,
That's a lot of
it
birds.
looks like a bunch of little specks, little bugs in the sky. But this picture
Oh my God.
is all
Look at him.
broad-winged hawks, like this bird on my glove here. So
That
broad-winged
was
hawks
cool.
can come through in some pretty big numbers, and even in just hours of time. It's about 300 in that one photo. There you go. Because some days we see 10, 20 in the early part of the season, depending on the wind. Some days we see hundreds, some days thousands at a time. And that's just broadwings. We see all these other different species mixed in as well. Vultures come through in huge numbers like that too, turkey vultures. So if someone's counting and keeping track of the count on a daily, actually hourly basis every day. And that's something you can go to our website and look at the numbers and how things fare day to day and where we're at in the season. I think we're just over 52,000 for this season now. So, and we've got a couple of weeks left, so we're still gonna add to that in the next couple of weeks.
If you happen to hit a bird like that, or you see one on the side of the road, how do you capture it? I mean, it's obviously under stress. It's just attacking.
So a couple things to keep in mind if you do encounter an injured bird like this, or even smaller or bigger. Keeping in mind they have very strong feet, so you want to always be aware of where those feet are. Keeping them in a calm, dark place is best. If you can get them into a cardboard box, punch a few holes in it, and just let them decompress while you're searching for help. That's the best thing to do. You might have to throw a jacket over their head, keep their head covered. That reduces their stress level because you take away their vision and you just kind of sensory input is much less, so it helps them calm down. And then calling a wildlife rehabilitator, which in itself can be a challenge because they're often few and far between, or they're far away from where you are. In our area, there's the Finger Lakes Raptor Center on Seneca Lake. There's a few in Rochester that we would recommend people call. There's now a new app. It's an app for everything, right? And I just downloaded it. Melissa, are you familiar with this? The wildlife rehab app?
Animal Help Now.
Yes, thank you. You would know, Chris. Yeah.
That lives right down the road.
That's true. So got rehabilitator in the family. So yeah, so there's an app you can put in your location and what bird or what animal you found, and they can give you some contact information. Sometimes your local veterinarian will know, or they may be able to take in the animal temporarily at least. But you do have 24 hours to get it to the properly licensed person. So.
I already said this, but no food or no water.
Right. I did not see it.
People get really concerned about that. Like, overnight with no food or no water, you know how sometimes, well not sometimes, if you need to go in for like a surgical procedure, they tell you not to eat or drink anything after except like clear liquids. So there's that in case the bird or animal needs surgery.
Internal injuries.
Or secondarily, people often, it's always with good intentions, but try to force feed. And there's two different openings, and you could accidentally force food down the wrong trachea versus the esophagus. So it is just best to let them rest, and often we don't provide them the correct food anyway. Like, spoiler alert, baby birds don't eat cat food in the wild.
And red-tailed hawks don't eat bologna. Actually,
They don't?
I had someone bring us
Adult
a bird.
birds
They
do.
didn't know we didn't rehab, and there was lysergic bologna in the kennel.
Nobody should eat bologna.
No.
But yeah, I
Nobody should eat bologna.
That's why we do some of this programming, is to kind of let everybody in on some of those inside pieces of information that will help in the future if you ever encounter a situation like that.
always call like Audubon. I tell people, and I didn't know about the app, but I just type in like New York State Wildlife Rehabilitator and the New York State DEC. I'm sorry if I said this, but they have a nice drop-down menu where you can select the type of animal, because not just any rehabilitator can take any kind of animal. You know, it's one thing to raise baby bunnies that have been orphaned versus a red-tailed hawk or an eagle or a bear. So you can drop it down, figure out, select what kind of care you need, and then you can search by county, I think, which can help you. And I just want to give a plug, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Rehabbers do not get money from the state. They do it all out of their own pocket. So if you were to drop an animal off, drop $20 off of them. Drop some paper towels or jug of bleach or something else that may help them, because they're running on donations and out of their own pocket to care for these animals. So that's all I'll say. Then I'll back to Dana.
Pretty relaxed. How long has he or she been?
Yeah, she's kind of an exceptional bird. She's been with me now for over 5 years. You noticed she was preening a little, and that's definitely a behavior to look for. They'll tell you these birds are comfortable in your presence. So even if you're fortunate to encounter that when you're out birding, you can be able to observe that. You're not intruding on the bird's privacy that much. She's been with me since a few months after she was injured. She was injured in September of her first year, which means she was not even an adult bird yet. She was off on her own, probably her first migration south. Unfortunately, didn't make it past New York State. And so she never really lived a full year of life in the wild. So immature birds are a little bit sometimes easier to work with and train, because they don't have as much life experience under their belt. They're just not as aware. So she's been very comfortable from the get-go, really. So we do know her age is roughly, next month, June-ish, usually when broadwings are hatching out babies. She'll be turning 6. We know her age because she had different plumage when she came to us. This is what she looked like when we first had her. That streaky chest pattern is much different than what she's got now. That's the sign of an immature broadwing whelp. That's the color, that's the coloration there. I like to think of this as kind of like her senior picture. Not her baby picture, but senior portrait size. So we are able to know her age. All the rest of the birds, no idea, because they were all adults when they were found injured. She's very comfortable. That's why you'll hear her talking and vocalizing. Even when she's in the kennel, she's calling because she wants to come back out. She's quiet right now, but I have a feeling she'll chime in a little bit more when we put her way. But this time of year, and she's kind of coming down off the peak of breeding season for her. She gets very vocal, and in the wild, these birds will be very vocal, calling back and forth to each other to seal the bond, announce their territories, that kind of thing. And she did lay 1 egg this season. Sometimes she lays 2. She's past that stage now. So we're coming down, and she just started molting. So I know she's coming out of that hormonal phase. When the molt starts, usually after they do lay eggs.
Do you give them names at all?
No, actually.
Okay.
Call her Broadway, B for short, So we use their species names in programming.
Got it.
So everyone remember what you saw, because this is a bird that you can see right out there, especially this time of year. We're on the end of their migration, but we're still getting a lot of immature broadwings coming back through this area of the state. So there's still broadwing time left. But if you go to the Adirondacks in the summer, the Catskills, or any of our really forested areas of the state, that's where you'll find these birds. You might hear them calling that really high-pitched whistle, and that's where they'll nest in New York. They need a little more forested areas, not so much like the red tails. All right, well, we got a couple more birds to show you. Speaking of red tails, yes, we do have a red-tailed hawk as well, so it would be a good comparison for you. It would be a very familiar bird to talk about, but one of my favorite species. He will not be as calm as the front, and he's also very dramatic coming out of the kennel, but he'll settle in on the glove, but he's just a different personality.
Just like dogs, they all have different personalities. Whoa! Sounds like our dog coming out of the crate. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Look at that tail.
He's also, as I mentioned,
This guy flies over our house every day.
for these birds. And he is a very vocal boy. This time of year,
Oh yeah, they are.
and tends to be a little more stressed.
You gotta get a picture.
We have to come out with the lid this time of year, but as you see, he sits on the glove fairly well, and he's
Gorgeous.
just a gorgeous bird to be able to present to you. He has some vision issues too, which is what also makes him a little more skittish. He was shot, and so he's
Oh.
blind in his left eye and has some damage to his right wing, so he's not fully sighted.
No,
We
poor
don't know
guy.
backstory, why he was shot, who did it, what they thought they were doing. Fortunately, someone found him and took him to a veterinarian. He was found in the central New York area, and so he's healed up, and now he's with us, unfortunately. It is illegal to shoot these birds. There's no hunting season for raptors. They're all, like all our migratory birds, protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. There's laws there. So it's one of those things to keep in mind. But not everyone's aware of the laws or appreciates these birds for their role in the environment. And sometimes they do encounter conflicts with people. If you have chickens, if you have something like that, a red tail might go after your chickens, things like that. So, but more often they're hunting your grounds for rodents, and that's really the more important role that they're going to play.
Sure do.
A lot of these raptors hunting small animals like that, they help keep keep those populations at bay. Because we all know it can happen if mice and rats get out of control. They spread disease, they get into our food supply. So having raptors around is a great natural pest control system. In fact, some agricultural practices, not necessarily, some are starting up in this country, more in other countries. They're installing barn owl boxes, trying to encourage some of these raptors to inhabit their agricultural lands, and finding that it's being very, very successful in keeping rodents at bay. So it makes sense, right? Yes, yeah, kestrel boxes are a great way. Kestrels and screech owls around here. We don't have too many barn owls naturally, but those will both be good species to have around.
Can you walk around a little?
Yeah, just letting him settle in just a little bit more because he'll get a little antsy when we start to.
If you can. If you can.
I totally will.
Can't do like a stress thing, like my dog can't.
Yeah, so the birds don't sweat like we do, like I'm doing right now. And it's a warm day. He's also a little stressed. So they'll either gape, which is just holding their mouth open to get like the hot air out. When you see our owls, they'll actually actively pant. And you'll see that cooler flutters, just like dogs. That's how they reduce their body temperature there. So this is a typical, eastern red-tailed hawk, coloration-wise. And those of you seeing his back right now can see that pretty brick red tail. There.
Gosh.
The white, creamy-colored chest with that dark line of feathers called the belly band. That's another key identifying mark for this species. Not all red tails are going to have a red tail, but they don't get their red tail until they're about almost 2 years old, into their second year of life. They'll start to molt, and they'll grow those adult feathers. And you'll see a lot this time of year, and then soon later in the summer, you'll see all these immature red tails. They look same size, same front markings pretty much, but their tails will be brown with dark brown bands in it, so there'll be more striping. And that's what an immature red tail will look like. They are one of my favorite species.
He's beautiful.
Red tails can be found all over North America. Some are year-round residents in their range. Like we'll definitely have red tails here in the winter time. Some even come down from the north to spend their winter here. But some will. And some will migrate even further than that. If you travel around the rest of the United States, there's different red tails. As you go further west, there's about 17 different subspecies of red-tailed hawk, and they vary in color. Some get very, very dark. Some get very light. You'll see more striping in the tail with western birds, and all kinds of things in between. So it's fun if you do travel, and try to find all those different subspecies of red tail. We're going to walk over here real quick.
That red tail.
Yeah, he's just a beautiful bird.
Not all red tails have red tails until they become an adult, so that throws people.
Yeah, it does.
Don't rely on that sort of thing.
How much does he weigh? So he's about maybe 2 pounds right now. A little more than 2 pounds. Which isn't much. And then he's an animal the size, a mammal the size of you.
Can you just come up and take a picture with red tail? Yeah.
This is gorgeous. So, birds have to be light to be able to fly. They have a hollow bone structure. Feathers in themselves are super light too, even though they cover their entire body. They don't measure up a lot of their mass there. Really, a lot of their weight comes from their flank muscles, their breast muscles, and feet, and their eyes, and their bodies. But very efficient. So we're gonna let him go ahead back in to take a
He's gorgeous. Don't you think?
Yeah. Absolutely.
When we're done here, I'm gonna go and buy a bottle of Moscato.
Okay.
And then we can go. Okay?
Okay.
Woo!
Here's my card. Comes if it's good.
Oh boy. He's taken care of though. I mean, he would be dead out in the wild because he couldn't survive flying. What?
Why? Why?
Why what?
Why?
Why what?
Excuse me.
Yeah, for a couple reasons. Bigger, stronger, difference in talent, strength there. Keep the gloves separate just for health reasons too. I don't really need as much of a bulk for my next bird. She's a little bit smaller, although just as much feisty. Some of the other birds there. So yeah, it's just a little more comfortable for the handler and the bird to just have the right thickness of the glove too. So we touched on the group of hawks in the raptor world. One migratory species, one year-round species you're very familiar with. Now we get into another group of raptors. The falcons.
Oh my god.
All of my
Falcons.
attitude. It's very, very cool.
Their legs.
Better just dial it back.
Full attitude and energy. Our falcons are. This is a Merlin. She's a female. So she's more brown and grayish on the back, streaking on the chest. A lot of raptors, like our hawks that you saw, their plumage is the same for males and females. With the falcons, you can distinguish them by their coloring. The male Merlins are going to be blue, sleety blue on the back of the wings and have light blue tail bands, as opposed to this off-white green color that she has. So she is obviously got a wing injury. You can see when she flaps that her left wing is much shorter than the right wing. So she was found with a pretty badly broken wing. No idea the nature of her injury, how she acquired it. But thankfully someone found her, got her the veterinary care she needed. They determined that the bone were not able to be repaired, and if they left that part of the wing on, it would just get in her way and not really be good for her quality of life. So she's got it partially amputated as a result. And should I have her sit on the right side? Maybe some of you are observing that, as opposed to the left, just so she presents her true shape. This falcon shape. If I show you her with her short wings, she kind of looks like a sharpshin dog in a sense. But those falcons have those long, pointy, tapered wings. They have very streamlined body shape.
Oh wow.
So in Geneva, I've had those nesting near me.
She's
That also makes me like,
she's
Very,
feisty.
feisty. Lately too. Even though I did give her a meal, actually a couple of snacks today before we came, she's probably still hungry. That's just the nature of them. Merlins have a lot of falcon species are very high energy birds, high metabolism. So they're not, one meal a day and done often. They're often hunting earlier in the day and later in the late afternoon, because they burn those calories pretty fast. They're kind of like those spicy little dogs. They have a lot of spunk, a lot of energy, a lot of vocalization to go along with that. It's often kind of rare. She doesn't usually spout off in a program setting. So today, she's got a little bit of a chip on her shoulder, I think. But that's the noise you'll hear from them. It's similar to the orchestral sound too. A little more bold. They're similar in shape, a little bit more bigger bigger than a kestrel, a little bulkier in size, slightly shorter tail than kestrels, but not much bigger than them. A lot of feistiness in them. They're very strong for their size. When we look at this bird and think about a starling or a mourning dove, those birds are almost as big as yellow falcons are. And those birds are on their menu for sure. They're capable of catching some fairly large songbirds and shorebirds too. And that's what they eat. They're avian predators mainly. They will eat other large insects, sometimes small mammals. She eats a lot of mice and quail with me. But they're aerial hunters by nature. So they are built to be very active, very maneuverable, those long wings and long tail, and able to go through the air with little resistance there. So they hunt similarly to how peregrines hunt. Peregrine falcon is their larger cousin. They'll spot a flock of smaller birds and they'll fly through that flock. They'll chase them up, they'll fly through the flock, split it up, eyeball who's the slow one, and then that'll become their target for their next meal. So
I saw Merlin. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Rochester, but in the middle of Colorado, like a really busy area, Merlin kill a bird, take it down in the middle of traffic, in the middle of like the road, kill it, and then pull off.
nice.
Like it was so busy, I was like, I can't believe I just saw that.
That's the thing another thing about the species, they're starting to show up more and more in our urban, suburban environments. They're taking advantage of, pigeons and starlings and house sparrows that are very plentiful. And they're even nesting in our towns and our cities too. I saw something similar in Brighton, at Pittsburgh Plaza. I had a Merlin actually chasing the crows, not the other way around, and this winter, and it was like a busy area again. But so these birds are one that seem to be taking advantage of our human landscape and the fact that we have these smaller birds in big numbers. So we welcome them to come and take a few starlings, take a few house sparrows here and there, because that's important. They're an invasive species, so it's good to have these predators coming back. They are on the rebound to, we've heard the story about the bald eagles and peregrine falcons and how their populations dwindled. So did merlins too, and some of our other bird-eating raptors like the accipiters. Merlins are starting to come back. So we're starting to see them more here as a nesting bird, which is a little bit south of their range, but they're coming here to nest. We can see them even here in the winter at times. They are migratory, so a lot of them will head further south. And they tend to go, the majority of their population nests a little further north, up into Canada. They are coming on urban after.
That's what's so cool. People, I was talking to someone and walking about birding and whether you're a herder or not. And I think if you enjoy watching birds and you're a birder, it doesn't mean you have $10,000 lens and you go on these birding expeditions and treks. And what's cool about some of these, it's kind of sad on one hand, but also kind of cool on the other that they're so adaptable. But you can see these amazing birds of prey like Merlin, peregrine falcons, even like Coopers and Sharpshin hawks. I live in Geneva and we have an osprey nesting on top of a cell tower that's above the post office. So they're moving in, and you don't have to go out into a beautiful grassland area, although do, because it's awesome. But you can be walking down the sidewalk. I do a lot of birding, walk my dog. Because there's just where there's people, there are pests, right? And where there are pests, there are predators. So just don't use rat poison, please.
No.
Because it does not stay where you think it does.
God, no. Never use poison.
And that bird, well, they're not really mammal eaters, are they?
Not too much.
But let's say Rex the hawk grabs a rat that's not dead yet, that has rat poison, and takes it, that red tail's gonna pass from being poisoned, even though it's not the target species, so. Just a little PSA.
That's something a lot of raptors are coming in to rehabbers with rodenticide poisoning. Big
Mm.
How what?
How often does he hunt?
Well, she gets fed. She can't do her own hunting anymore. None of the birds can. So everything we present food-wise is already killed. She gets fed normally once a day, although depending on what our activity is going to be, I may give her an early meal and a
I
later meal.
was curious in the wild.
Yeah, in the wild they do tend to be more active in the morning hours, into the late morning hours, and then again, late afternoon into right before dusk. And so sometimes they're often one of the first birds you might see at a hawk watch, and one of the last birds you might see on the count too, because of that activity that they'll do. And we talk about their attitude. Another thing we get to observe a lot, especially in hawk watching, when they're around other raptors that are in their airspace, they're very bold and will chase and harass the bigger birds. Even an eagle or poor turkey vultures who don't do anything to them anyway. But these falcons will, chase anything out of their airspace, even though they're small. They're pretty feisty. So I mean, she doesn't have necessarily attitudes towards me, but it's just the nature of the species. That they have a lot of feistiness in them.
Just our catchment chase our just something that's not to taste.
Yeah, they probably have nesting, especially if you have the catchments nesting.
Yeah, they're using box
Yeah.
As Dana is transitioning to the next bird, a good place to watch for Merlin, besides, in an urban setting, and peregrine falcons as well. If you get out, I'm going to use Montezuma because that's my home, right? Where there's a place where a lot of ducks and or shorebirds are, so sandpipers, plovers, things like that, in a wide open flat area. In Montezuma, we're able to flood some fields seasonally to provide feeding habitat for shorebirds. If the shorebirds start going nuts and they all pick up and start flying in 1,000 different directions, look for the reason why. Could be an eagle, could be a merlin. Vastly different size, but I would almost, if I was a sandpiper, be more afraid of a merlin than an eagle, because that's like a little cigarette boat coming for you rather than like the Titanic. They're much, not that eagles are lazy or slow or not agile, but that thing is designed for speed and turning on a dime. So the times that I've seen them really in action has been either harassing a larger bird, like a crow, northern harrier, or something like that, or coming in and just getting everybody up flying, where there's a bunch of shorebirds or ducks. They are not going to go after a duck, right? They're way too...
Yeah, they're too little.
A falcon, absolutely. A peregrine.
Peregrines, yes.
Absolutely. But that whenever the birds start getting crazy and like flying in 1,000 different directions, it's not random, it's not for fun. Usually it's like because they're fearing for their life.
Right. So we're going to switch gears now to the night shift. So you do have one owl species to show you. I'm sure you'll be able to recognize this one. She is pretty impressive.
Oh my god, an owl.
Oh, so many people love owls. Even people who are not birders love
Oh, I love owls.
Very popular.
You gotta see this owl.
She's turned around, usually couldn't
Oh my god, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Wow.
She's usually the other way and she was standing like that. It's kind of like, was like off our routine.
Oh my
So
god, look at her. Ah.
So yeah, this is our great
Never seen one.
owl. She has permanent wing injury, so she's not fully flighted. That's her only issue there. Everything else is working well. So you will see her as she's out here looking around and listening, not just using those eyes, but using those ears too. Great horned owls are one of my favorites. They're just such an impressive species. They're one of our largest owl species here in our area. They only are trumped by the snowy owl, really. That comes and visits
all the
us
time.
in the winter. So great horned owls are really one of your top,
We just
top
haven't
predators
seen
out
them.
there in the forest, in our suburbs too. They're another bird you can find just about anywhere, especially where there's food. You know, strong rodent eater. We know great horns have the capability of catching larger prey, you know, woodchucks, squirrels, rabbits, skunks even, sometimes the occasional house cat. But they're really more focused in on catching rodents. That's what the majority of their diet is. So super good to have around. You know, they also sometimes take other birds. They're seen, they don't have a good reputation, of course, in the wild from other bird species. So you might be able to find these birds if you see a bunch of crows making a ruckus. Crows know them as a natural predator, so they'll gang up on those birds to chase them out of the area. So sometimes you can find these birds by watching other bird behavior, the mobbing behavior.
What's she looking at?
Always looking at the nooks and crannies of a new room. So, and she'll probably be focused more on the open doors. So she always looks out through the windows and looks to the trees that are around. But well, I'll put her in the purse to really get a good idea just how big and tall she is. She tends to sit up more upright on the purse. It's a little more solid than my weed down here. So she's a little more comfortable there sometimes. Pretty tall, huge feet, huge talons. Their talons are so strong, they have 400 pounds of pressure per square inch.
Wow.
So as I said, incredible gripping power. So even though, you know, I use a triple layer glove for her, leather glove, it's really not so much that I'm worried about her puncturing it, but squeezing. That could break my wrist, I'm sure. She's never done anything close to that, which is why I know
Best
she's
picture, bird picture you'll
a
ever
good
get.
bird. She's pretty shy. And she's always never been aggressive towards any of our enemies, really. So she's been a pretty cooperative bird. So she's always like, you want to get a good looking and listening, you get a good idea of the range of motion in her head, her neck muscles, her neck flexibility. They have the ability to turn their head 270 degrees out of full circle. That's because they cannot move their eyes. Their eyes are fixed in their sockets. So even if they have to look something off to the right or left just a little bit, they've got to turn that head. So it ends up looking pretty robotic.
Look. Look what she sees.
So because those eyes are so large, they don't have muscles to move them in their skull, but they've adapted extra vertebrae in their neck. They have twice as many vertebrae, 14 in fact, to help them be more flexible and be able to turn farther around. As you can see, it's pretty wild. It is. And they have a flexibility, this direction too, and they'll use that head motion to help focus on the sound too. Now, she's a great horned owl, even though these feathers on top of her head are not horns. They're not her ears either. They're just feathers to help them blend in with their environment better. But the feathers around their eyes, that facial disc, is what helps these birds hear better. They're very stiff feathers.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
So the facial disc actually helps draw sound into their ear cavities, which is right behind it, and helps amplify it even more. So it's much like a satellite dish, helps to gather that and focus it into a central spot. So I always have kids try to do this. You can do it too. But when you cup your ears, we're trying to listen. You taking all that sound that's coming at you and it's bouncing off your hand and going right to your ear. So that's how the feathers around the eyes work for them. And they also have their ears off center in 3 dimensions too. So they are not in the same spot on both sides of their head like ours are. may have one ear up high and towards the back and the other one down low and towards the front. So wherever things sound louder, they're able to locate that sound much quicker. And a lot of times owls that are very nocturnal have the great hearing like these birds, they can catch food successfully without necessarily having to see it. So on a wintry day when there's a foot of snow on the ground and mice are still pretty active under their bowls and things, they can hear the tunneling under feet of snow and be able to catch a meal just by listening to it. So they have some of these superpowers, I like to say. Things that we can only imagine what their world looks like and sounds like. Very strong vision, just like other raptors, but also adapted for nighttime to see in their dim light. So they're able to just use the light from the stars. Here we had the moon out where I was last night. It was super bright. I don't know about tonight. It's a little dark. Lit everything up. Then,
To give you a little frame of reference of how far they can turn their heads, just dance at 270 degrees. It's a myth that they turn their head all the way around, right? Because twist the bottle cap, what happens? It comes off, right? So that wouldn't be, it would be too long lived if they could do that. So when she was talking, I was turning my head. So 180 degrees is straight line, right? So I can look over, not even over my shoulder, but I can look, I probably have a 180 degree range of motion. So 270 would be more, like if I could look over my shoulder, but I don't have those extra vertebrae like the owl does. But I can also move my eyeballs in my socket, so can't have everything.
there you get that fluttering, it's called the Gular flutter. This is panting, really. She's pretty warm. And with the temperatures on the rise these few days, it's been pretty warm for all of us. Kind of adjusting to it. We've got really good insulation. She's got feathers on her talons, on her toes, so we've got really good insulation. They're built for this kind of climate in the winter, too. And they're one of our earliest nesting birds, which is also kind of a remarkable thing. They'll be on nests in January and February around here. So, yeah, testament to how hard
high in a tree would it be, or is it like build the tree?
It varies. They do not build their own nests, like most owls don't build their own nests. They are not as strict of a cavity nester like screech owls and barn owls are. So sometimes they'll go in an old big hollowed out tree. But they'll use other nests, like from red-tailed hawks, great herons, crows. They'll borrow from nature, and they're pretty resourceful that way. Sometimes they'll nest on ledges, and I've even heard of them nesting on buildings, like flower boxes. And in fact, one of the more famous nest cams out there is one that was from someone's flower box in their apartment building. I watched that a few years ago. It was kind of neat. So they're another bird that you can find way out in the country and where it's not very populated with people, or you can find them in the city. So they're a very adaptable species. And their size, because they're not have such a specialized diet, they take a variety of prey. That has helped them to kind of survive through some of the environmental problems that we've had. But as I said, there's other things. We touched on rodenticide poisoning. There's other things that these birds are more susceptible to disease, West Nile virus, now the avian influenza that's showing up here. We've got tabs on that. So there are a lot of challenges for these birds out there. And natural causes, natural challenges, and also man-made ones. So we're a small part of the cause to try to teach people more about these birds. Just even if it's just raising awareness that they exist, that you can find these birds right in your own backyard, so to speak, or your own habitat, where you travel and where you like to hang out. So being aware that they're around, being more aware of what you put into the environment also can affect them. There they're a great way of letting us know
asking
what
because
can affect us.
theories.
And the environmental contaminants that get into the food chain. We're at the top just like they are. So looking at how their populations are surviving can give us a clue as to how strong and healthy the environment is there for us. Anybody have any last questions?
If a little mouse ran over this floor right now, would that owl pick him up with his talons, or would he come up with his?
Well, hunting, they catch at their beak, so they're going to go for their talons. Use the talons to catch their food. The beak is designed for that hook to tear if they need to. If it was a little mouse, she'd go nice down.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can kind of see how
Yes.
big or wide her mouth is as she's panting there, and you can see how large it opens up. But yeah, so I'll give her usually a mouse snack earlier in the day, and she'll
Mouse
just gulp
snack.
that down, and then she gets a rat. Getting a little bigger, and she
Oh,
needs to
boy.
pull that
Rat at
it's a
night.
little too big for her to swallow. But yeah, I heard you found the owl pellet, and so these birds can't digest all the roughage, the fur, the bones, feathers if it's a bird. So that gets all compacted and regurgitated in pellet form, and that's how they get rid of that stuff. Hawks and the Diroraptors, they regurgitate pellets too, but they don't have any bones in them. Partly because they can pick apart their food more, but also they can digest their bones more than owls can. So if you find a pellet, there's no bones in it, it's likely from maybe even a kestrel or a hawk or a falcon. If it's got bones in it, likely it's from an owl.
There's a lot more birds though than
Yeah.
cough up pellets
Yes.
that I was aware of when I first started learning. Like
Water birds.
I watched a belted kingfisher cough up a pellet. Bald eagles will do it. Lots of different. I don't know. Is there like a way you can kind of like separate? Like all these guys do it because like ducks don't, but kingfisher do.
Well, I think it has to do with the diet. They're eating other animal matter. So fur and bones and, fur and like scales and things like that are generally not digestible. They're made of keratin, like a stronger material that wouldn't break down as much in their stomach. So like allowing fish eaters to, even ospreys and eagles, cast that stuff up too.
And there's other birds like chickens, easy example, who have a crop. So some birds will pick up grit or little stones, and so the crop is just basically like their pre-stomach, and the birds have teeth, so they pick up grit, so as they're eating things like seeds and grains, those rocks are helping to pulverize what they're eating, and then, so it's like very interesting because it's two different digestive systems in the same, the order? Birds, apes?
Yeah.
So like mammals only have one digestive system, right? Well, we're getting some
Ruminants are a lot different.
Yeah. Brought to the high gut.
Yeah,
Whatever, but
herbivores can be
ruminants, yeah. It's just very interesting the adaptations that have occurred to
Yeah.
best suit them.
And the more you learn about birds and other animals, the more whoa, it's like
Yeah.
so diverse out there. Getting a little warm, so get a little bit they've been known to live to be close to 30 in the wild, and definitely into their 30s in captivity. So
Damn.
they're a pretty
Pretty
long-lived
crazy.
species there. We've had her, again, like the rest of our birds, just about 5 years. She was an adult when she was found, though, so we really don't know her age. She's got to be at least 7, probably, or older, I would say. 'Cause she was in captivity for another year before I got her, so, and I've been found as an adult, so. Hopefully she's still got 10, 20 years left in her, but we have no idea really how old she is. She doesn't act like she's aged, elderly, I guess. Everything's still, working. They can get arthritis and things, develop some similar problems that we do as we get older. But, so So, you know, keeping track of their diet, keeping track of their weights and things like that. Regular health checks is important for their care, helping their longevity. It looks from a distance like it is, yeah. That's definitely a great horned owl feather. Did you find that out around?
End of the farm this morning.
Yeah, this is the time they're
Wow.
molting. She started molting about a month ago, so they're going to be dropping feathers for sure. So that's a nice flight feather there. And if you notice it, if anyone wants to feel it, it's much softer. It's almost velvety, and that's like another feature for these owls that are highly nocturnal. They have the ability to fly silently through the night. Because of those feathers, the structure of the flight feathers especially, it's kind of velvety on the surface, but the edges are broken out and they have almost like little eyelashes along the edges to help break up the air movement over the surface of the wing and muffle the sound. So that's how they're able to kind of sneak up on their prey and be able to be undetected out there. Very stealthy. So I say, you know, if you're out at night, you wouldn't know if an owl flew over your head unless you saw it. Or it made some noise because they fly so quietly.
I had a raven fly very close over the top